There are moments in life when even the brightest stars carry shadows no one ever sees. And for Lionel Richie, a man whose voice defined romance for generations, that hidden shadow was a story he kept locked inside his heart for decades. To the world, he was untouchable, a global icon, a performer whose name echoed across stadiums, whose songs became the soundtrack of millions of lives. Fame crowned him with everything people dream of: Grammys, Oscars, wealth, admiration, and a legacy carved into the history of music itself. But behind the spotlight, behind the polished smile and gentle charisma, there was something else: a quiet ache, a chapter he never finished, a truth he had been too afraid or too broken to speak aloud. And when Lionel Richie finally opened up at 74 years old, what he revealed stunned the world, because it wasn't about fame or success or the scandals that tabloids once obsessed over. It was about her, the woman who shaped him long before the world ever knew his name. The woman he would later confess was the real love of his life. Before that confession, before the heartbreak, and before the world crowned him a legend, Lionel Richie was simply Lionel Brockman Richie Jr., a boy born on June 20th, 1949, in Tuskegee, Alabama, a place whose rhythms, culture, and soul would one day become the roots of his music. He grew up surrounded by excellence, Tuskegee University towering behind him like both a guide and a promise. His grandmother, a classical pianist, filled their home with elegance and discipline. His father, a man of structure and responsibility, ran the college's systems office. And every Sunday morning, gospel music drifted from church windows and wrapped itself around Lionel's heart, teaching him how powerful emotion could sound. By the time he reached 1968, Lionel was no longer just a young dreamer. He had joined the Commodores, an R&B group that would soon explode into stardom. Their sound, raw, soulful, unapologetically alive, became a new force in the music world. Opening for the Jackson 5, touring endlessly, recording late into the night, the Commodores were unstoppable. And in the middle of it all was Lionel, the soft-spoken poet with a voice people described as velvet dipped in emotion. Songs like Easy and 3 Times a Lady didn't just climb charts. They defined the heart of the band. The world called him the golden boy of soul, the man who could turn heartbreak into something beautiful. But even legends bleed, even legends break. And behind Lionel Richie's rise to fame, something deeply personal was already beginning to shape the course of his life. A love story that started long before the world even knew who he was. Long before the world fell in love with Lionel Richie's voice, he had already fallen in love with a woman who understood him in a way no audience ever could. Her name was Brenda Harvey, his college sweetheart from Tuskegee. She wasn't dazzled by fame or talent. She simply loved Lionel when he was still just a young dreamer scribbling lyrics in notebooks and chasing melodies in crowded dorm rooms. They met in the early 1970s, 2 students with small wallets, big dreams, and the kind of laughter that made life feel lighter. Together, they shared cheap meals, long walks across campus, and whispered conversations about a future they believed music could someday give them. By 1975, fueled by hope and the innocence of young love, they got married. And for a while, it truly felt like love could survive anything, even fame. As the Commodores skyrocketed, Brenda was always there. She helped with outfits, answered fan mail, soothed Lionel's anxieties, and remained the anchor that kept him grounded while he was being pulled into a world of flashing cameras and sleepless studio nights. Then came 1981, Endless Love, Lionel's duet with Diana Ross, hit number one and became one of the defining songs of a generation. The world loved it. They played it at weddings, anniversaries, and quiet moments filled with longing. But what people didn't know was that the song came from a deeper place. Lionel's lyrics, full of devotion, longing, guilt, and vulnerability, were born from emotions he could never fully admit to anyone but himself. It was a love song, yes, but it was also a reflection of cracks that were beginning to form in his marriage. In 1983, Lionel and Brenda adopted a little girl named Nicole, the daughter of one of Lionel's bandmates. Overnight, their family became a symbol of perfection. Talented, generous, or graceful, but perfection comes with weight. And behind their picture-perfect smiles, pressure was quietly building. Lionel was being swallowed by fame, tours stretched for months, studio sessions bled into dawn, airports replaced home. And Brenda? She was left behind, raising their daughter while rumors and absences grew louder. Lionel once admitted that during those years he felt like he was living out of a suitcase and dying a little every day. He didn't realize it at the time, but love, real love, was slipping through his fingers, not because it wasn't as strong, but because fame was stronger. But the unraveling had only begun, because soon Lionel Richie would meet someone who would change everything, and spark one of the most explosive scandals Hollywood had ever seen. By the late 1980s, Lionel Richie had become a global phenomenon. Hello? Truly. Say you, say me. His songs dominated charts, weddings, radio stations, and the hearts of millions. He was no longer just a superstar, he was an icon, but the higher he climbed, the lonelier he became. Night after night, applause filled the stadiums. But when the lights went out and the crowds disappeared, Lionel often found himself alone in cold hotel rooms, wondering what pieces of himself he had lost along the way. And then she appeared, Diane Alexander, a young dancer on the set of his music video Dancing on the Ceiling. She was beautiful, yes, but that wasn't what drew him in. She was calm, she listened, she asked about him. The man, not the fame, not the legacy, not the myth the world had built around him. At first, it was harmless, a friendship, a few jokes, late-night conversations that felt more honest than anything Lionel had experienced in years. But friendship has a way of becoming something else when two lonely hearts collide. Soon, their connection deepened into something dangerous, something neither of them could hide, and something Lionel should never have allowed to happen, because he was still married to Brenda, still part of a family people saw as perfect. Yet his heart was already divided. The affair became a fast escalating secret, hidden behind hotel doors and tour schedules, whispered phone calls, rushed meetings, and the kind of quiet guilt that creeps into every song, every performance. People close to Lionel began to notice. His voice sounded heavier. His eyes looked tired. His lyrics became darker, laced with longing and regret. And Brenda, she felt it. A wife always knows. The breaking point came in 1988, the night Brenda found out Lionel was at Diane's apartment in Beverly Hills. Fueled by betrayal, heartbreak, and raw emotion, she drove there herself. What she saw when the door opened changed everything. According to reports, what followed became Hollywood legend, a confrontation so explosive that neighbors called the police. Brenda was arrested for trespassing and espousal battery, and the tabloids devoured every detail like vultures. Overnight, the man known for singing devotion and tenderness became the face of public betrayal. The scandal tore apart not only a marriage, but an entire era of Lionel's life. In 1993, after nearly 18 years together, Lionel and Brenda divorced. Years later, he would look back on that time with painful honesty. "I destroyed myself," he said. "Fame gave me everything and cost me everything." But life didn't stop there, because from the ashes of one shattered marriage, another chapter was waiting, one that would bring new beginnings, new children, and eventually more heartbreak. 2 years after his painful divorce from Brenda, Lionel married the woman who had unknowingly ignited the scandal, Diane Alexander. For a moment, it looked like life was offering him a fresh start. A new marriage, a new chapter, and soon 2 new children. Miles, born in 1994, and Sophia, born in 1998. On the outside, everything seemed calm again. Diane supported his tours, embraced the spotlight gracefully, and blended perfectly into the glamorous world Lionel had built. They traveled, celebrated, raised their children, and for a while, Lionel seemed to find balance. But beneath the surface, the old wounds were still there. Fame had taken too much from him, loneliness had carved deep scars, and guilt had become a quiet shadow he carried everywhere. By 2004, the second marriage collapsed. Their divorce was a staggering, nearly $20 million in settlement, and brought with it the same sadness that had followed Lionel for decades. 2 marriages, 2 heartbreaks, and a lifetime of public scrutiny. But the universe wasn't finished testing him. That same year, Lionel's body began to break down. A mysterious throat condition forced him into 4 surgeries, each one threatening to destroy not just his career, but the very identity he'd built his entire life around. "You don't want anybody fooling around down there," he later joked, masking fear with humor. And just as he was fighting for his voice, he suffered another devastating blow. The death of his father, Lionel Richie Sr., the man who had taught him discipline, humility, and a strength. The combination almost crushed him. For the first time in his life, Lionel felt truly empty. Not because he lost fame, he still had that. Not because he lost money, he had plenty. But because he lost the parts of himself that mattered most. And then, in the middle of grief, illness, and silence, something unexpected happened. After a show in Jamaica, while sitting alone, an elderly man approached him. The man placed a gentle hand on Lionel's shoulder and whispered, "You must survive. You are our beacon of hope." Something inside Lionel broke. He wept that night, not from pain, but from a strange, powerful reminder that the world still needed him, that even at his lowest, he was still touching lives. It was in that quiet moment that memories of another love, a love the world had never known, came rushing back. A woman from long before the scandals, long before fame, long before Lionel became Lionel Richie. A woman who had inspired some of his most heartfelt songs. A woman he had lost not to betrayal, but to life itself. And she would soon become the center of the confession that shook fans decades later. After 2 divorces, years of scandals, and a health crisis that nearly stole his voice, Lionel Richie finally slowed down. For the first time in decades, the world wasn't pulling him in 1,000 directions. And in that unfamiliar quiet, memories he had buried long ago began rising to the surface. He started sitting at the piano again, not as a superstar, not as a performer, but as a man trying to understand his own heart. The glamour had faded, the noise had stopped, and what remained was the one truth he had spent a lifetime avoiding. There had been someone before it all, before Brenda, before Diane, before stadiums, Grammys, magazine covers, and endless flights across the world. A woman from his early Commodore's days, someone gentle, spiritual, calm, a woman who loved Lionel the man, not Lionel the rising star. Her name was never spoken publicly. Lionel refused to expose her to the world, even decades later, but people close to him remembered her well. She was the muse behind the softest, most intimate songs he ever wrote. Still, just to be close to you, and whispers say, even parts of Truly. When she left, long before he was famous, Lionel didn't fight, didn't beg, didn't chase. He buried the heartbreak in music. Every melody was a memory, every lyric was a wound, and as the world fell in love with his songs, Lionel was quietly pouring out the pain of the woman he could never forget. Years later, in interviews, he would hint about her, never naming, never explaining, only saying she was the one who got away. Not a muse, not a fantasy, but the only person who ever loved him before fame twisted everything he touched. That loss shaped his entire life. It lingered through every tour, every marriage, every heartbreak, every award speech, every lonely hotel room. It was the grief that never aged, the ache that never softened, the love that never found closure. And by the time Lionel reached his 60s, the truth became harder to ignore. His greatest songs weren't written for the women the world knew. They were written for her. The love he lost long before he ever understood what love really meant. But life wasn't finished with Lionel, because when he turned 65, someone new walked into his world. A woman who would finally bring him peace after decades of chaos. Her name was Lisa Parigi, and she would be the one to help him face the truth he had carried for nearly half a century. By the time Lionel Richie turned 65, the world had already written his story for him: 2 divorces, broken friendships, career highs, personal lows, a lifetime spent under a spotlight that gave him everything and took just as much away. People assumed Lionel's heart had retired, that he had lived through every possible version of love, passion, betrayal, regret, loneliness, and the silent ache of the woman he lost long before he became a legend. But life rarely follows the script people expect. In 2014, Lionel attended a dinner party in Los Angeles. There, among conversations he barely cared to follow, he met Lisa Parigi, a woman 40 years younger, but infinitely wiser in calmness, grounding, and quiet strength. She wasn't an actress. She wasn't a model chasing fame. She wasn't even a fan. In fact, she didn't know who Lionel Richie was, and that was the beginning of something different, something real. Lisa was from Switzerland with Caribbean and Chinese roots, an elegant blend of cultures that shaped her into someone deeply compassionate and endlessly curious. She spoke 4 languages fluently. She had built a successful career in the tech industry. She was the founder of the Estate Collection, a luxury candle brand inspired by her travels, and Glow Up Beauty, a vegan skincare line. But what made her extraordinary wasn't her resume. It was her presence. For the first time in years, Lionel felt seen, not as a star, not as a symbol, but as a man who had suffered, who had loved, who had lost, and who was still learning how to heal. Lisa brought peace to his life in a way fame never could. She blended effortlessly into his world, traveling with him, laughing with him, encouraging him, grounding him. She bonded closely with Nicole, Miles, and Sophia, becoming a quiet, steady force within the family. When Sophia married music executive Elliot Grange in France in 2023, Lisa was there, present, supportive, unbothered by attention she never sought. Together, Lionel and Lisa traveled the world, Amsterdam for his 74th birthday, Los Angeles for award shows, London for King Charles III's coronation concert, even the Vatican, where they met Pope Francis in 2019. Yet through it all, there was one thing they deliberately avoided: marriage. After 2 divorces that nearly destroyed him, Lionel finally understood something most people learn too late. "I've learned how not to lose something good," he said gently. Lisa understood. She didn't need a ring. She didn't need a title. She simply needed love. And Lionel gave her that wholeheartedly. But even with Lisa's calming presence, one truth still lingered. One story remained incomplete. One love remained unspoken. The love from Lionel's past, the one he never stopped thinking about, the one that shaped his songs, his heartbreak, his entire life. And at age 74, he finally told the world the truth. When Lionel Richie turned 74, the world expected the usual: another warm interview, another smile, another charming story about a lifetime in music. Instead, Lionel gave them silence. For weeks, he avoided the public eye, no announcements, no celebrations, just a quiet man, looking back on a life filled with triumphs and losses. Then, during the filming of a documentary about his journey, something shifted. In a dimly lit studio, surrounded by cameras and decades of memories, Lionel Richie, the man who had written some of the greatest love songs in history, finally let his guard fall. His voice trembled, his eyes softened, and for the first time he spoke not as a legend, but as a man who had lived, hurt, and remembered. "There was someone," he began, "a long time ago, before all this." He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. Fans had spent years guessing who the muse behind his most emotional songs truly was. Truly a still, "Just to be close to you," "Hello," even "Say You, Say Me." People thought they were written for Brenda or Diane or even Lisa, but they weren't. They were written for her, the woman he loved before the world acclaimed him, the woman who saw him before he became a superstar, the woman who walked away not because of betrayal, but because life took them on different paths. "You go through life thinking you have time," Lionel said softly. "You think you'll circle back to the people who mattered, but sometimes you blink and they're gone, or you're different, or they are." It wasn't regret in his voice. It was acceptance, the kind that comes only after decades of carrying a quiet ache. He wasn't rebuking Brenda or Diane. He wasn't dismissing Lisa. He wasn't rewriting history. He was simply acknowledging the truth he had guarded for almost half a century. Sometimes the love of your life isn't the one you marry. Sometimes it's the one who teaches you how to love and then leaves before you know what that lesson means. "She taught me," Lionel whispered, "what it means to care without control, to feel deeply without needing to possess." And in that moment, the world understood Lionel Richie in a way they never had before. The legend melted away. The superstar faded, and all that remained was a man, a human being, who had finally spoken the words he had held inside for 50 years. His confession wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to shock. It was gentle, painful, honest, beautiful, and it changed everything about the way fans saw his music. But Lionel wasn't finished, because after opening that old wound, he still had one more truth to confront. A truth about legacy, forgiveness, and what love ultimately means at the end of a long, complicated life. After Lionel's quiet but earth-shaking confession, something shifted. not just in him, but in everyone who heard his words. Fans flooded social media with their own stories of the one who got away, the love that slipped through their fingers, the memories that never truly faded. It was as if Lionel Richie had opened a universal wound, and suddenly millions of people realized they weren't alone. For decades, Lionel had connected the world through melody, but now at 74, he was connecting people through honesty. And in that honesty, Lionel himself began to see his life differently. He no longer hid behind nostalgia. He no longer tried to rewrite the painful parts. He no longer pretended that fame had been worth every sacrifice. Instead, he faced his past head-on. He admitted that his greatest songs came from the most vulnerable corners of his heart, that without heartbreak, there would have been no hello, no truly, no still, no endless love. The cruel irony was undeniable. The same woman whose absence haunted him was the reason the world fell in love with his music. But life had also given Lionel another gift, a chance to rediscover love, not the firestorm that destroys, but the kind that heals. Lisa Parigi became that source of peace. He began speaking differently about her, with a softness that only comes from surviving the storms. "She's my calm," he told People magazine, "my peace." He didn't compare her to the past because he finally understood how unfair comparisons can be. Lisa wasn't a replacement. She wasn't meant to fill old shadows. She was part of the chapter he was living now, a chapter of healing, forgiveness, and acceptance. She supported him through every quiet reflection, every family moment, every performance where emotion threatened to break his voice. Nicole, Miles, and Sophia saw a new version of their father. Not just a superstar with gold records on the wall, but a survivor who had endured betrayal, illness, grief, and public ridicule, yet he still found the courage to sing about love every night. When asked what he would say to the woman from his youth, the one he never forgot, the one who taught him love before he understood its weight, Lionel paused and whispered, "You were the first page of a story I'm still writing." Not anger, not regret, just gratitude. Because at 74, Lionel Richie finally understood love doesn't always end in marriage. It doesn't always give you a lifetime. Sometimes it gives you a lesson, a melody, a memory, a wound that shapes you, and a gift that stays even after the person is gone. And maybe that's why Lionel Richie's music endures. Not because it's perfect, but because it's human. Today, he ends many interviews with a single line that captures everything he has learned in 74 years of loving, losing, and healing. Sometimes the love of your life isn't the one you keep, it's the one that keeps you human. And so, the story of Lionel Richie reminds us of something timeless. That behind every legend is a human being, behind every smile is a story, and behind every love song is a heart that has lived, broken, healed, and remembered. If Lionel Richie's journey touched you today, if his confession at 74 made you reflect on your own life, your own memories, your own one that got away, then this is your moment to join the conversation. Which Lionel Richie song do you believe was written for the woman he never forgot? Was it hello, still, truly, or something deeper? Tell us in the comments below. Your voice matters here because every story of love, whether kept or lost, deserves to be heard. And if you want more untold stories, more emotional confessions, and more hidden chapters from Hollywood's most iconic stars, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next legend we uncover. This is not just a channel, it's a community of people who want to understand the hearts behind the fame. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the love of your life doesn't stay forever, but it stays in your soul.